everyone, and a warm welcome to this consultation session on minimum requirements for plastic waste recovery by the core group of verified plastic recovery by the Prevent Waste Alliance. My name is Stephanie Beitin. I'm the Managing Director of PCX Solutions, which is a non-profit working on policy and EPR and managing a plastic waste reduction standard. And I'm happy to be your moderator for today's session. Yeah, so before we kick off, allow me just to share a few housekeeping matters with you. If we can have the slide up, perfect, yes. So this session is being recorded and the recording will be also shared. So if you don't want to be recorded, then please leave now. Also, we kindly ask you to switch off your camera and mute yourself for now. We will have a more interactive session in a little bit. And for now, during the presentation, you can put your questions in the chat box and we will get to them later. So if we can have the next slide for the flow and the speakers for today's session. We will have a short introduction by Silke, followed then by a presentation by Thierry on the minimum requirements and by Ina on environmental claims. And as I mentioned, the second half of the session will be more interactive because we really want to hear your thoughts, your questions and your comments on our ongoing work. And we will also have then Barak on stage with us. And yeah, with that, I would already like to introduce Dr. Silke Migelski. She is an advisor on circular economy of the GIZ and basically the guardian of our core group. And she will give some background of our work. And I give the floor to Silke.
Silke, you're still on mute. Sorry.
Thanks, Annika. It's always good to have an angel on the side. And thank you, Stephanie, for your very kind introduction. And I'm happy to welcome all of you here for in the name of the Prevent Waste Alliance, who is hosting this first consultation meeting on minimum requirements for plastic waste recovery certification. And as most of you know, the Prevent Waste Alliance is a multi-actor partnership supporting knowledge exchange and international cooperation in the field of circular economy among its members of industry, academia, civil society, and public institutions. And before we start with the consultation, I like to share some information with you on the work of plastic credit or how the work on plastic credit started within this Prevent Waste Alliance. And before we come to this consultation of the Verified Plastic Recovery Core Group. So please, yes, the next slide gives you an overview. And we started this work based on the critical review of the WWF and the TCI in early 21. And Prevent members started a working group addressing this major critics as the missing formal and standardized definitions and the transparency in the plastic credit market. The working group published a discussion paper led by Henning Wilz from the Wuppertal Institute and answering some of this question. And this paper can be found on our webpage. It's addressing plastic credit schemes and EPR and their risk and opportunities. In parallel, 4 pilot projects, altogether with 12 Prevent members, tested simultaneously plastic credits as an inclusive and transparent financial mechanism to combat plastic pollution and in different local contexts. And the first report of the ValueCred pilot project resulted then in a round table discussion series with voluntary standard setters and members developing a joint statement of welcoming a global plastic agreement in May 22. And at this year, in the beginning, a group of 16 stakeholders, I will display in a minute to you, formed this plastic credit core group and committed resources to a roadmap of a process of harmonization the plastic credit landscape in order to demonstrate the potential of plastic credits as a transparent and credible voluntary financing mechanism, considering social, environmental, and economic aspects linked to the UN Plastic Treaty process. As a first result, this core group successfully submitted in August the joint position and submitted it by BV Rio to this INC3 meeting in Nairobi, which will be presented to you in a minute. The Prevent Waste Alliance will host also a networking event just before the INC3 meeting in Nairobi on the 12th of November, where circular solutions of their members which contribute to the UN Plastic Treaty process will be presented. And as mentioned, the VPR core group reached its first milestone and will continue its work towards the harmonization of the different approaches. It's our goal to interact with all relevant stakeholders and actors to create and financing mechanisms that supports international transition towards resource efficiency, environmental protection, and the circular economy. The work that organizations worldwide are conducting to combat plastic pollution is very valuable. This group strives to find an answer on how their operation can be funded in an environmental, social, and political sound way that paves the way for sustainable development. Please show the next slide with all our members of this core group who started this process of harmonization as BV Rio ton-to-ton repurposed zero plastic ocean solution, plastic credit solution, waste reduction, Delterra, Everwave, Empower, Phoenix, FTA, Surplus, Therapy Circulab, CleanHub, the Wuppertal Institute, Roddick and Nielsen, and Nidisi. And thank you so much for all your cooperation and efforts in this work. And thank you for taking over the moderation. Steffi, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the background of how the core group came together in the first place. And I would like to give over now to Thierry Sanders. He is the director of BV Rio, and he will share a bit more about the minimum requirements that we worked on of plastic recovery units, and he can speak on this so eloquently. So over to you, Thierry.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the pressure. So I will be eloquent and short. No, so the minimum requirements, you see it everywhere on this presentation, on the invitations. And could we go one step back, please? Yeah. So just a word of warning, the minimum requirements are extremely short and they're extremely simple. And that is our objective. We are also doing this with very common English. So it's not complicated. There's no jargon, or at least we try to minimize jargon. And if I would go straight to the minimum requirements, we would be finished with this presentation in 2 minutes. So, however, I have a full 18 minutes or 20 minutes, which I'm not planning to use. And I would like to actually start more with the background and the why, so that at least you understand where the 16 of us have come from. And I've been thankfully been asked to present this to you. Okay, so over to the why. Why are we doing this? So our goals essentially starts at the bottom of this slide. It is recovery. So we're trying to increase as much as possible the recovery. Maybe a better English word is collection of plastic waste. And of course, some of you may think waste is not the right term. It should be recyclables. But please understand that the wording we have chosen is just so that it communicates easily. And this consultation round is actually to get input and feedback from you on terminology that we might need to change. Okay, so our goal is recovery. Now, to build recovery, we go to the right, which is we need funds. So we need funds to increase collections, to increase services for plastic recovery, plastic recycling. And at the moment, that is quite a challenge. Now, to increase funds, we need to build trust. And at the moment, that is also quite a challenge. So we need to not increase trust, but also restore trust among the buyers of, for example, plastic credits, plastic certificates, of a more generic term could be outcomes-based financial instruments. But these buyers or funders of the plastic recovery services are essentially consumer goods companies. They can be governments, municipalities, and also donors or philanthropies. So the idea essentially is if we can improve the trust, and I'll get to the point why there's this reduction in trust currently. But if we can build trust, we can get more funds. With more funds, we can recover more plastics. I think it's quite a simple, positive feedback loop. And the way to get this, to sort of kickstart this, we thought, or we think, and we are convinced of, is, next slide, is to basically agree together on some basic minimum requirements to which these plastic recovery services should be held to and held accountable to. If we don't have any basic minimum requirements, then we are basically standing on quicksand. No one will know what it is that is being collected, whether it's being double counted or not. There will be so many doubts in this market that we won't be able to raise the finance. So we need to agree on basic minimum requirements for things like plastic credits, plastic certificates, or other financing instruments to be bought, to become more in demand. Okay, next slide. So I think to sort of drive the message home, we have high value plastics over on the left, which are generally PET and HDPE. Now, without any of us, any of the people in this meeting, or any of, let's say, the project developers in the plastic sector, there is so much happening without us. Most of it's happening without us. It's the waste pickers, it's the MRFs, it's the collection centers, it's the aggregators, the recyclers that are already doing the work, except they are doing this based on the material value. And of course, there may be a little bit of subsidy coming from municipalities or other sources. In the lucky countries, there's EPR regulations where there's additional funding coming for the services. But basically, the market is being driven by material value. On the right-hand side, we have low-value plastics. So we have PETs, which have pigments in it. We have the LDPEs. We have the MLPs. There's multi-layer sachets, etc. Now, there isn't a single waste picker that is really interested in collecting any of this. And waste pickers in the emerging markets are collecting more than 60% of all recyclable materials. So if we want to get them interested in collecting the low value plastics, it's not going to happen because of the material value. Therefore, we need to subsidize, we need to incentivize them through a service payment. And it's essentially this service payment what we are talking about here. So the minimum requirements are needed to make these service payments more robust, trustworthy, and therefore increase their demand among consumer goods companies, donors, etc. Next slide. Okay, last week I went to the Magritte Museum in Belgium, where I saw the painting of the pipe, Ceci n'est pas une pipe. I thought this applies very, very much in this sector. where we have two bales of plastic here. They look identical, yet they are absolutely not identical. Next slide. Okay, going back to the last example of low value plastics and high value plastics. On the left, we have high value commercially recyclable plastics, which this bale probably is. PET with some HDPE mixed in. This bale is probably weighs around 500 kilos. Now, we are not looking at that that side of the equation. We are looking at how do we increase the mixed or low value non-commercially recyclable plastics, because that is the stuff that's going to be left on the curbside if nothing happens to it, or if the plastic treaty doesn't work. So this is an example of one of the minimum requirements. Next. So there are many factories that are producing or printing something wrong on a bottle, and therefore they're producing factory rejects. So you have post-industrial waste. That is also not what we are focusing on. We are focusing on post-consumer waste, and because that's where the majority lies. And to be frank, factories need to pay for their own waste disposal. So we don't need to raise funds for factories to dispose of their rejects. The companies will do that themselves. So we need to deal with how to solve this post-consumer waste problem. Next. Right. So on the left, there is actually another bill hidden behind the left bill, but you can't see it. So that is why double counting is always done in very, how do you say, very sneaky ways. It's often hidden. So we at BV Rio are very active in Brazil. We know of some plastic service providers, waste collection service providers, that are selling plastic credits internationally when those same tons are also being sold locally, that same service. This cannot happen. So double counting is not on. We need to be counting unique tons of plastic waste. Next. Right. So imagine there are service providers out there collecting their own waste, using their own systems, accounting everything themselves, and declaring their own tons when they are maybe double counting. So to avoid that, we need to verify, we need to have these minimum requirements verified by an independent third party. And that verification is not purely on the systems being used or the protocols being used for the collection of waste. Transactions also need to be checked, because you could have a very good system. You know, there's myself, I have an app which we use to monitor. The system may be watertight, but if we are putting the wrong data into the system, for example, with 30% moisture, then we're actually only collecting 70% plastic and 30% moisture. So we need to have a watertight system of data entry. And this would apply also to blockchain systems. Everyone says blockchain is very secure. That is maybe the case, like our app, but it's the data you put in which will determine whether the data is reliable. Next. So, for lack of a better name, we have, as a core group, actually done a sort of democratic round. What are we going to call this minimum requirements? Maybe minimum requirements is the best term, but we decided for just to make it easier for ourselves to call it a VPU, so a verified plastic recovery unit, because we are not developing credits. We are defining what is a unit of plastic recovery service. And So when we talk about this VPU, it's a verified ton of recovered post-consumer plastic that meets a set of minimum requirements. Next. So as I said, the minimum requirements are not plastic credits. They're not plastic certificates. They're not a standard. We are just saying, let's build a more secure building block to be able to construct more robust plastic credits and certification mechanisms than what is out there today. Today, we have roughly, my last count was about 32 different types of plastic credits, which are, that's not we as in BV Rio, but globally. And these function, and they are very necessary in countries where EPR regulations aren't functioning. Even in countries where EPR regulations are functioning, there are areas in countries, huge countries like India, where there is no functioning EPR in some of the states, and voluntary plastic credits or certificates could function next to EPR systems. So what we are suggesting is just a building block for certificates, credits, or payment for services. Next. Okay, why do we need to restore trust in these plastic credits? Well, essentially, over the I've worked in the carbon credit space during the 1990s. I stopped in roughly the year 2000. I worked for a company called Eco Securities, and over the last five to, let's say, 8 years, of course, there has been a boom in the area of carbon credits and carbon offsets. However, a lot of NGOs and a lot of consumers are very skeptical, very doubtful, very critical of these carbon credits, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot going wrong in that market, and it's not just about the price. I mean, obviously, the price of carbon credits has plummeted over the last year. You see the graph here for voluntary carbon markets. But there's essentially 3 issues with the voluntary carbon credit market. This is not something I wrote down myself. I consulted with some very experienced people in the carbon markets and basically asked them to name their top 3. These were the top 3. So there's a perceived license to pollute. So being able to buy a carbon offset and continue emitting at the same time is not a solution. We need to avoid this compensation mechanism, this offset mechanism, and we can't be creating something like plastic credits or plastic recovery funding instruments just to continue pollution. So that has to be disincentivized or disentangled. Secondly is the way that voluntary carbon markets have been created, the underlying structures and methodologies are extremely complex. So it is almost, it is very difficult for even myself, as an educated, or at least I consider myself educated economist, to complete a full PDD for one of these voluntary carbon credit project templates, which also includes all sorts of complicated formulas. These templates are sometimes 100 pages long. You need to have a consultant to help you develop these projects. So that means inherently the structure is wrong. It's too expensive. It's not going to help small plastic recovery projects because it's too complicated to put these methodologies to work. So because these methodologies of the voluntary carbon markets are so complicated for an average layperson, it also means that the auditors are having trouble to properly audit and verify these credits. Finally, the voluntary carbon markets are very much focused on additionality. In other words, the additional tons of CO2 being sequestered or mitigated, and have therefore either put less emphasis and less focus on the social impact and the community impact of those credits. But on the other hand, there are many credits that state, especially in the red space, in the forestry space, that state that they will support local communities and with social impact and with funding. But those local communities hardly ever receive the money. So we cannot, can we go to the next slide? So we cannot build the plastic credit and plastic financing markets based on the thinking and methodologies of the carbon markets. We have to distance ourselves from the methodologies and the thinking of the carbon markets and from some of the players in that market so that we can come up with a better, simpler, and more robust system. Next slide. Okay, that was the why. Now, I just have one slide on the minimum requirements, and I just want to illustrate this by one slide because it is just one slide. It's not 10 commandments. It's actually 11 points here, 11 requirements. They're also not chiseled out of stone yet. We are looking for your comments and your feedback on this. So nothing is set in stone at this stage. And we are looking for your wisdom to improve this so that we get something, a structure that works for us all in this plastic recovery space. So transparency is the first principle, then legal compliance, and thirdly is impact. On transparency side, we have 3 requirements: that it should be verified by an independent third party, as I mentioned previously. Also, traceability from source to destination. So the bales that we were looking at just previously on the slides, that's what they look like when they are brought to the cement factory or the recycler or the waste to energy plant. However, that recycler doesn't know where that plastic came from. So maybe it was factory rejects. Therefore, we need to know where this came from. We need traceability. We need no double counting, as already covered previously. We need to comply with national law, which is a no-brainer. We already discussed the post-consumer plastics and also why we need to make this work for low-value plastics, non-commercially recyclable plastics. Now, there's a nuance here. There are high-value plastics like PET, HDPE, PP, others, that are maybe too far away from a recycler. So it becomes prohibitive to transport it all the way to the city or wherever the recycler is to recycle that plastic. So then by nature, high value plastic can also be non-commercially recyclable. Also, we need to make sure that plastics collected are delivered to better destinations than where it came from. So can we go to the next slide? Right. This is called the waste management hierarchy, which is based on UNEP and Basel Convention documents. So on the left-hand side, you see the source, which are basically the waste producers, like our homes, ourselves, businesses, hotels, restaurants, shops. And essentially, everything that's post-consumer waste can either go to a worse destination, which is an open dump site, or all the way down into the ocean, so some of the red section, or it can go to a better destination, which starts at the lower end, the managed landfill, which we have called Class C, for also a lack of a better term. And then we have, let's say, linear solutions, not circular solutions, like waste to energy and cement or glass co-processing. So basically the plastics are being used as fuel, and of course after that they're gone. So if we aim to create a circular economy, we need to move it higher into the class A section, hopefully being able to reuse or repair, and failing that, recycle. So when we say we need to take it from a worse source to a better destination, we are talking about anywhere on this graph which is red or gray, and up to the class A, B, or C sections.
Dr. you mentioned that this is the first time that these KPIs have been presented.
Can we go back to the previous slide? Okay, so point 3 under impact is delivered to a better destination. Then there is a lot of useful collection happening, for example, by Clean Hub, GeoCycle, where a lot of mixed plastics are sent as fuel to cement factories and other forms of co-processing. However, there may actually be a lot of recyclables in there, and I don't know, or we don't know how feasible it is, but it would be great if the recyclables can be sorted out rather than burned. Then, as with the carbon markets, we are looking for an increased tonnage collected than before the project, and also an increase year on year. Then finally, we have more the social side. We do no harm, so we minimize harm done either socially or environmentally. Environmentally, you have to think of leakage into groundwater or into rivers, and of course harm can be to any local communities. And this could be unintentional harm done. And finally, we also aim to improve working conditions for the informal sector. We had quite a long debate about whether that should be a mandatory improvement of working conditions for the informal sector. However, in some cases, the organizations or others in the core group find it difficult to meet those levels. And in the case of BV Rio in Rio de Janeiro, we're actually paying waste pickers 2 times the minimum wage. We think that's enough. We don't need to improve what we're already doing. So these are essentially the minimum requirements for plastic recovery projects. And next slide. And there we are. So now it's your turn. We need your help. Visit the website. We have a little bit of a quirky link there. We will come with a better link at some point, but this is clickable. It's in your invitation also from Prevent. And give us your feedback. There's some comment boxes there. And if you feel this is the right direction that we're heading in, then register your support. The more supporters, the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thierry. Not only did you put it very eloquently, but you also managed to communicate a quite complex topic in an easy way and sneaked in a bit of an art lesson. I love this one. So thank you for that. We have now Ina Balik. If you can just come up on screen. She's a freelance sustainability strategist with 20 years of experience, and she's also an expert on ISO. I think there was already some discussion on standards inside the chat, which is great. So Ina will just give a very quick snapshot of the work on environmental claims. We keep this to maximum 5 minutes so that we have sufficient time for the discussion and your questions later. Thank you. Over to you, Ina.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thierry, first of all, for setting the groundwork, and I love the art bit as well. Well done. And thanks, Stephanie, for the nice introduction. As Stephanie already mentioned briefly, I am sitting on different ISO panels and plenaries, and am consulting within these positions on international harmonization and standardization. So I'm a big fan of what I have read in the comments already. Next slide, please. I'm trying to keep it to less than 5 minutes, so maybe we have some more time for commenting and going through these. The background, first of all, I wanted to highlight, it's not only the why for the minimum requirements that made us aware that there is some issues in that market with upcoming plastic credits. It's as well another issue that's been greenwashing. But I think very important to note here that greenwashing has been quite virulently discussed in some media in the past 18 months, maybe 2 years, but it's actually very old. So greenwashing has a history of 30 years. ISO has established with a purpose to combat greenwashing a subcommittee already in 1993. So as you can see, so the need for avoiding false claims or misleading claims or false interpretation of claims by users is not a new issue, even if it seems to be quite emerging right now. But I just wanted to let you know this has been discussed for 30 years, and there's a subcommittee in ISO that has formed 30 years ago and have been working on standardization of principles, terminologies, and definitions to make environmental claims and environmental labels. Next slide, please. So what that means as well, that despite the fact that plastic credits are quite new and maybe have a history of, let's say, 5, maximum 6 years, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. And as Cherry rightfully mentioned as well, we are still working and we are looking in this consultation to actively get really constructive feedback from you. So this is all work in progress. Nothing is set in stone. But we're not trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to how to make adequate claims that cannot be accused of making greenwashing claims, because I think no one wants that. It is very damaging to the organizations, but as well it is damaging to us as the actors in the plastic credit market if it falls back on us that we were accused of greenwashing. So just made one small snippet here so you can see what this is about. So ISO has developed a series many years ago, and it's continuously updating the series to keep abreast of international developments. So one element here of the scope you can see in ISO 40021, so it has a full series. As you can see, the underlined here that it says clearly environmental claims should be clear, transparent, scientifically sound, and documented. There is obviously a lot more to the diversity of standards that ISO have developed. There's an entire family under ISO 14020, so it's 21, 24, 25, 26, 27, and so on. However, there's active work been going on for the past 30 years to really ensure that companies can make rightful claims internationally harmonized without distorting competition or unfair market situations, so to say, because consumers are being misled. Next slide, please. More importantly, though, because ISO still is a voluntary effort, if you wish, from companies, no one has to obviously use ISO standards. I think why claims are getting really important thing to get right now. There is sustained effort now from various countries, including the European Union as well, to stamp out greenwashing. And I just gave you 2 snippets here of recent press releases in September 23. So one is from the European Parliament, and there is a vote expected by the MEPs to take place now in November, probably in parallel with or after INC3 in Kenya. And after this vote has been passed, there will be 24 months for companies to, or for the EU member states more accurately, to transcribe them and operationalize the law that will be massively avoiding false claims, and are working on terms and definitions and terminologies for that. But as well, there's efforts being made in China, Canada, Singapore, and many other countries are currently developing or strengthening their legislative frameworks to eliminate greenwashing. So the links are included. You can't snip them from here, but I'm sure we're more than happy to share them with you after the presentation so you can read up more in detail about these international efforts. The next slide, please. This is a quite complex slide. But I just wanted to highlight there was one important thing here. So as you can see, we're not alone in that space. So in the effort of stamping out greenwashing and greenwashing accusations, I think we need to consider international developments. And we have a sub-working group on claims, similar as we had a sub-working group or have a sub-working group on minimum requirements. And I just wanted to lay out a little bit the roadmap here in terms of how we can progress, because it is work in progress and we're looking to really bring more people on board and taking on board as well your comments and your concerns and how to effectively work with that. So on the y-axis, I highlighted the what. So it is not for us to determine what has to be done. So this is firmly in the hands of policymakers in different countries, as I mentioned before on the slide. One example here is being the European Parliament. As I have highlighted before, the vote is to be expected in November, but as well the efforts from ISO, which are having the mandate from the UN to come up with standardization and harmonization in that sphere. So they will basically lay the groundwork and what can be done, and they lay out the terminology, the principles and definitions. But where the prevent subgroup is coming in is really then to take that knowledge and say, well, how can we advise our clients? How can we, as operators in that space, make sure that we're following the general guidance and principles which are out there and work in line to not be accused of greenwashing? So as you can see, what we're planning as well, shortly after NC3, there is ongoing consultations about revisions of the ISO series, ISO 40020. I am a member of that subcommittee as well. So they're revising all standards in that series, and there's a couple of them. So to form an official liaison between prevent sub-working group, so to say, which I'm leading on claims. So there will be a mutual feedback from ISO into us and from us into ISO, because obviously we can shape international standards as well. And that's a process which probably can start in December. And I think from there on, we have to decide how many open consultations we'd like to further have to see how can we shape the international standardization, but as well, how far can we learn from what ISO is doing in their ongoing revisions of eco-labeling and environmental claims work. And the end of the line here is just for one example for Europe. As you can see, by November 2025 is when I really hope we already have come to a consensus agreement, because by then the European member states have to apply the law, which I just mentioned in the beginning. And that would be it for my part now. So this is just a rough roadmap, but you can see it is quite convoluted and complex, but it's important that we stay abreast of all developments and we realize that we're not working in isolation on that topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ina. Okay, so we have 15 minutes more left for the interactive part of today's session. So we will have the previous speakers as well as Barak Eckstein. He is the founder of Ton to Ton, and he can also help to answer some of the questions, including myself. I love the fact that there's already a very interactive conversation going on in the chat. So we will take on all your comments. And as Thierry shared, we also have the website. So we will take your comments from the chat as well as the ones from the website. And I try to pick out some of the questions instead and direct them to the people. So we can also stop screen sharing, Annika, maybe. Then we can see ourselves a bit better. So I try to pick some of the questions first. Again, the comments we take on. So I think there is one question on, have you considered hard to recycle plastic, usually flexibles? So I think the question is around this non-commercially recyclable. Either Thierry or Barak, you would like to take a crack on this one?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically the biggest question and challenge, how to deal with the non-recyclable plastic, especially in places where there is no infrastructure. Co-processing, it's one solution that everyone tend to adopt. It's the better place to take plastic and treat it, and in very large volumes as well. And in the same time, it's like we're doing in other companies, manage to develop new systems, new solutions how to repurpose plastic, how to process it into different upcycling, I would say, different plastic boards or so on. And then find more solutions for the plastic. Is still in process. It's the biggest problem. That's why it's non-recyclable. That's why it's a non-value. So it's a challenge, but I think that during the process of the market of plastic credit and funds coming into this segment, into this market, so more new solutions are coming in. But it is definitely a big challenge, yeah.
No, thank you for that. And a bit related, there is also a comment on incineration and the waste hierarchy. Maybe, Thierry, would you like to respond? That certainly incineration is not the best option, and I think we all agree on that. But then a little bit our thinking on the waste hierarchy, which we discussed in the group.
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot see the chat or the question. So
well, I can just read it out quickly. So it basically says Class B incineration of this hierarchy is certainly not to support. I dare to question whether it's actually better than a managed landfills, and credits shall not support these technologies. Maybe basically the comment.
Yeah. Well, I had the fortune to work in Mozambique earlier this year with an organization called Amor. The issue in Mozambique is that there are no proper managed landfills with, that are properly sanitized. And therefore, in a country like Mozambique, which certainly does have cement factories, this may be the very best solution. Also, there are some plastic recyclers, but they have very strict criteria as to the quality of the plastic. So it basically means, what do you do with this low value plastics? Sometimes you just don't have better options. Even the bordering country, South Africa, which has the biggest recycling capacity in Southern Africa, will not even take PET from surrounding countries because they already have too much. So, if with lack of a better solution, this needs to be done. And I think, organizations like Clean Hub, GeoCycle that I mentioned previously, are doing what they can given the local circumstances.
Thank you so much, Thierry. Ben, I see you have a hand up. Would you like to ask your question directly?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask what the consideration has been for heavy or sink fractions of sorting plants, or essentially the rejected streams, which are often polyolefin based, highly commercially usable on their own or when purified. I know that most of this seems to be targeted towards emerging market landscapes in which the issue is that there's targeted low value materials that aren't being collected at all, but a lot of incineration happens here because the efficiency of sorting processes are about 50% or 60%. So I just wanted to get opinions on whether that will ever be encompassed by the VPUs, or if that's kind of outside of the scope because of the materials clause. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Barak or Thierry, do you want to respond on this one?
I can, yeah, and Thierry, you can add some more. Basically, the focus is on collecting the non-recyclable plastic, the one that cannot be collected by the informal waste pickers and either by the government, so it's just left behind. And then when it comes to the MRF, it should be sorted into different categories, and then if you can do anything with that, it should go for cycling. But like the material that you mentioned, sometimes the only solution is co-processing or incineration eventually, or if it's going to the landfill. Most of the incinerations that I saw are out of function in countries that we are working, Vietnam, Cambodia, and then there is open burning. So just when the plastic becomes too much, so they just like burning, and then when you go to the landfill, you just see like smoke all over. It looks like hell. So sometimes incineration can be better, but it's definitely not the good solution. So it's still a problem. And then most of the funding, what we are looking at, it should be driving into the low middle income countries, right? The global south, where there is no infrastructure. And then what will be the best solution?
Yeah. So Ben, maybe one thing to bear in mind is that we are really talking about the bare minimum. So, you know, anything, so let's call this not even the bronze standard, it's, you know, well, let's say the plastic standard. So from plastic, you can go up to bronze, to silver, to gold. And you see this also in the carbon credits market. The more that you offer, the better, you know, let's say the better the destination, probably the higher or the more funds you can get for that service. So if you are bringing it to waste to energy plants today, but you can actually find a way to recycle. So for example, there's great work being done in plastic lumber and wood plastic composite. Those could be good destinations for low value plastics. Which is maybe better than incineration, or sorry, not incineration, waste to energy or co-processing. So you can then get a higher price for, you know, the funding that you're receiving for the service. So think of it more in that level. We're the bare minimum. That's what we're trying to secure.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I run a startup that does process control systems for manufacturing based on the heavy fraction. So kind of in that territory, it's nice to hear that that's a potential use case down the line, but really clarifying. So thank you for your time there.
Thank you. So I'm trying to pick a few more questions, and again, we will try to get back to your other questions and comments through that you left in the chat and on the website. So I think there is a bit of a discussion around all the standards and how the VPU, like the minimum requirements, interact with the standards. So I try to take a crack on that, and Ina, maybe then you want to build on that, because also one question is basically asking how the minimum requirements compare to some positions papers that were out with recommendations on corporate plastic stewardship, and they seem to be less ambitious. So maybe I start first by saying these are the minimum requirements that we as a whole group could identify, which for us is really the baseline. As Thierry also said, this is the minimum how credits or plastic projects should adhere to. And the idea that you can always be more ambitious, you can add on premiums, for example, more social inclusive projects or aspects of the project. We just wanted to get together to really set a minimum standard that each project should adhere to also sort out some bad actors that might be in the market that not are following these rules. Then we also advocate that a standard should be used, and there are different standards out there. There is Vera, we are managing the plastic pollution reduction standard, the PPRS, and there are other standards out there. So these already, usually the good standards incorporate already the minimum requirements. So the minimum requirement can be seen as the basis and then the standard. And as Ina also mentioned, we are trying to feed in some of these terminologies, definition, into the ISO process as well. Ina, would you like to build on what I just said in regards to the interaction with standards?
Yeah, as I said, so it's really good to see some of the comments in the chat as well. So there seem to be more people in the chat who are involved and knowledgeable about different kind of work streams in ISO, either from technical committees or CEN work. What we really see as a big benefit here, having so much diverse stakeholders on the Prevent Waste Alliance, with literally so many countries being represented, to have a, I don't know how to say that in an appropriate way, but I probably have a better angle into feeding into ISO, because I'm not talking about, oh, it's a personal interest of 2 or 3 companies, but like we're having a big stakeholders group. So sitting on the panel for environmental management systems, first of all, which are very all-encompassing about verification certification standards, as well as on environmental statements and labeling. I think we can feed a lot into ISO. They're always looking for experts, obviously, and I think all of us in the room are experts in the field, and equally that we can benefit from being in the known in which direction ISO is working. So I think I'm hearing from everyone that harmonization is something everyone is deeply craving for the past years. I can't say anything more because I will be attending a very large ISO meeting on environmental claims specifically after INC 3. That's the end of November. So I think as soon as December comes, I will have a lot more information for everyone. But that's probably all I can add for now.
Okay, and maybe I have time for one more question. There is a question: is it possible to establish rules to offsetting to consider the value of low plastic collection with a premium so that producers of LVP can be correctly credited? A question from Chris in Plastic Bank. I'm not really sure if I understood the question, so I don't know if Thierry or Barak, you understood it, then please go ahead. Otherwise, maybe Chris, you want to clarify.
Yeah, could Chris clarify? Yeah.
Is there? No. Then maybe we get back to him directly. And so, is anyone still seeing one specific question that we can take on? So there's a question. Can you provide me with a
Chris is there. Chris?
Hello. Yeah, I attended the webinar establishing the true value of plastic impact, considering the type of material, the location, and other factors. And we have been recycling high-value plastic. And I would like to know if buyers, current purchasers of plastic credits, funding the collection of high-value plastics can actually offset their low-value plastic production. So is it possible to establish rules on that to put a premium? You know, if they're a low-value plastic producer, put a premium on them and charge them for this?
Yeah. Interesting thought. No, but so one of the minimum requirements is non-commercially recyclable plastics. And so I guess that kind of rules it out. But I understand what you're saying, that if they collect, super clean PET, but we charge them 5 times the price for that service, then that can go to funding low value plastics.
Correct.
It's kind of convoluted. Maybe they should just focus on the high value plastics and then start a separate project on low value plastics next to it, rather than trying to embed all of this sort of internal offsetting scheme, which will just make it too complicated. And that is exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Are there house rules on this, established on this, or position papers on crediting and offsetting?
Yeah, if I may, I think it also depends if it is a compliance market and under the EPR regime. Maybe we can dig deeper in the group and share with you some resources, because we are also coming to the end. So Chris, we will get back to you on this, because I think it's a super interesting question. And I would just like to take the last minute to close the session. I love the interactivity, and so I would like to thank all our speakers, and I would like to thank our whole group, because it's really great as an industry to get together and to learn from each other and to continuously try to improve. That's what the group has been doing the last few months, and we will continue. And we will continue also to meet in person. Who is in Nairobi, please join us. As Silke mentioned, there is a networking event on the Sunday the 12th, where the topic will be discussed again and we can meet in person. Also, remember to comment further on the website or to share it further with some of your colleagues to get more constructive feedback. And please also join the Prevent Working Group. I make some promotion for you, Silke. That's the next slide. If you're interested to join this working group or other working groups, then please reach out to Silke or the wider Prevent team. Yeah, so basically that's it for today. We feel there is a lot of need for further discussion, and thank you so much for your inputs and feedbacks. And with that, I think I wish everyone a nice rest of the day wherever you are, and please stay safe. And I hope to see some of you in Nairobi. Thank you, Silke, Thierry, Barak.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you very much.
Thank you, everyone.